So, I have always been a huge fan of endgame. In MMOs, in single-player games, whatever the genre happens to be, the endgame is when the world fully opens up with brand new, fun and exciting challenges to go out and discover. So of course when Diablo 4 developers hyped up its endgame, I foolishly allowed myself to get swept up in it. And like most things that are hyped, I didn't think Diablo 4 lived up to it. But even worse than that is I actually thought the endgame was kind of bad. And that is what this video is going to focus on. So let's jump right into it. In all honesty, when I first got into the endgame, I was enjoying it. I thought that the leveling curve felt good, gear upgrades were coming in pretty often, and the capstone dungeons were a fun challenge, which was something I craved after what was a relatively easy campaign. However, that initial enjoyment took a turn for the worse after getting into World Tier 4, which I guess would be where the actual endgame begins. So the thing about World Tier 4 is that unlike World Tier 3, which I thought cranked the difficulty dial reasonably, World Tier 4 cranked it way too much. And my reasoning for that is, I thought the capstone dungeons were supposed to test your gear and level, and see if you were ready to move on. And that seemed to be the case for World Tier 3, but not World Tier 4. When I first entered World Tier 4, I was basically being one-shot by normal enemy attacks. I mean, sure, I was level 58, much lower than the recommended level, but in World Tier 3, at that level, I was confidently clearing level 20 Nightmare dungeons. I also cleared the Capstone dungeon without any issue, so I really thought that meant I'd have a smooth transition into the next tier. Anyways, regardless of all that, I tried to stick with it, clearing whatever Tree of Whisper quest I could, hoping that the gear and experience would make it all worthwhile. And hate to spoil it for you, but it was not. Because of the RNG with gear, I was actually getting the same quality of stuff that I could get in World Tier 3. I spent hours slowly grinding away at whatever quest I could reasonably finish, and I wasn't getting anything to show for it. Even the experience points were bad, and it just felt like a huge waste of time. So in the end, it felt more worthwhile to go back into World Tier 3 and mindlessly grind away at Nightmare dungeons. I was getting gear upgrades more often this way, and the experience points per hour were far greater. It felt kind of backwards to me that this turned out to be the best course of action. I wanted to do the more challenging stuff, but the incentive just wasn't there. Which I think is a great segue into the difficulty, which I also thought was a bit of a letdown. So the endgame does get significantly more difficult. As I mentioned in World Tier 4, enemies do a ton more damage, and they get a ton more HP. But this is all scaling, and I am not the hugest fan of when the challenge is primarily because of scaling. I feel like whenever that's the case, the challenge has little to do with the mechanics or your skill, and instead it's mostly based on your gear, build, and level. And don't get me wrong, of course it takes skill to maximize your gear, and knowing what goes into creating a good build, but you can also look all of that up online, and then it just boils down to being the right level with the right gear. Another way that they ramped up the difficulty is by adding more affixes to the elites. In theory, that's a cool way to add more to those encounters, but in practice, what I've seen happen more often than I care for are ridiculous combinations of affixes that are more annoying to deal with than challenging, and subjectively, not very fun. For example, I've had enemy packs where the elites had Waller, Fire Chanted, Terrifying on them, and other enemies were tossing out Chilling Winds, and of course, for good measure, there were other projectiles flying every which way. So not only is that complete chaos, and you can barely see what's going on, those affix combinations, I thought they felt awful. Kind of like orange juice and mint. It just left a bad taste in my mouth. And to add insult to injury, some of the Nightmare Sigil affixes only make it worse. For instance, the lightning one where you have to constantly dodge into that small dome, or that dumb rock that follows you around. I never found those to be very fun to deal with, and made running the dungeons actually worse. Another area that started to fall by the wayside for me was the pacing. As I mentioned earlier, levels and gear came pretty often at the start, but at around level 70, that stops being true. It's not just that the leveling slows down. What really had an impact on me was that gear upgrades almost come to a full stop I didn't realize how much those dopamine kicks helped to mask the very repetitive and recycled nature of Diablo 4's endgame, which I think is my biggest issue with the endgame. The content is very repetitive and, even worse, recycled. For example, one of the biggest pieces of the endgame content are the Nightmare Dungeons, which are the exact same dungeons that you could run at level 1, just with added scaling, which you know I love, and affixes, which really doesn't change them all that much. And you know, that wouldn't be so bad. I play MMOs where you run the same 8 dungeons for an entire expansion. But in Diablo 4, all the dungeons look and feel the same, from their layouts to the environments, the objectives, and even the boss fights. It all feels very copied and pasted. I've actually had times where I had no idea if I had just cleared the same dungeon twice in a row. How do you differentiate one nondescript cave or dungeon from another? And I really don't know why it turned out that way. There are some really great environments in Diablo 4, so why are the dungeons so bland? For example, one of my favorite environments is a stronghold where you're going through a ship graveyard. This place just had such a cool atmosphere. You are roping and jumping across sinking ships with rain and thunder crashing in the background, and it just felt so epic. Unfortunately, that is a one-time thing that you do, and what you repeat over and over again is the bland and boring stuff. And for a game that is primarily focused on going through dungeons over and over again, that kind of sucks. So another nail in the coffin is that there really isn't much new content to do once you get into the end game. There are the Capstone dungeons, which are brand new dungeons, but it's just 2 dungeons that most players will probably just run one time. There's also the Tree of Whispers and Helltides, which honestly, going with that theme of repetitive and recycled, these 2 activities are almost the exact same thing. With Helltides, you are killing enemies out in the world to collect aberrant cinders, and with the Tree of Whispers, you are killing enemies out in the world and clearing the same dungeons you've cleared a dozen times before to collect grim favors. And then you trade both of those things in for gear and experience. And then of course there's the Nightmare Dungeons, which we've already discussed. So all of this raised a big question for me. What is the point? Why am I grinding out all these levels and gear? There is no new content. It's all the same stuff over and over again. So do I just keep grinding it out to do slightly higher scaled content? And even if I do get to level 100 and min-max all of my gear, whenever a new season starts, I'm going to be forced to start over anyway. That last point is something that I have a lot of trouble accepting. I've heard the argument that's what all ARPGs do, and fair enough, but why is that the only option? I don't see why I can't start a new season with a character that I've already heavily invested into. The game has level scaling. I wouldn't think it would be that hard to do. By the way, I actually have been playing the new season. It's endgame content that I wanted to experience for myself, and it's basically exactly what I feared. I thought that I would hate starting over, and I did. It felt bad. I missed having all my legendaries and abilities. I hated regrinding Renown over again, and getting all the glyphs over again. As for the new stuff that was added, well, it didn't really impress me. The plotline is paper thin, the malignant caves and tunnels are just like every other cave and tunnel. I did think the new gems were pretty cool, but they weren't exactly game-changing. And I didn't care for the battle pass or the chapter challenges. In all honesty, I felt like the new season was even more repetitive than before, because I actually had to redo more content over again. So Diablo 4 is like running on a hamster wheel with little payoff. At least in MMOs, when I jump back on that hamster wheel for every patch and expansion, it's to get gear that will help with future content. It all might be an illusion, but I like feeling what I am doing is worthwhile. So those are the reasons why I feel like the end game in Diablo 4 is kind of bad. I think it's way too repetitive and grindy, without any real payoff. The content is mostly recycled, and then the new season is like, hey, remember that repetitive and grindy content that you just did? Well, have fun doing it all over again. Anyways, that will be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you all think in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so. And until next time, bye!